Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. This is David Duford at Final Expense Agent Mentor at FEAgentmentor.com, and I want to thank you so much for popping in on this very good overview on final expense telemarketing leads. And basically what I'm going to do today in this overview is give you all the basic information on all things final expense telemarketing. This is really designed for those agents that are perhaps newer to final expense and maybe have never done any kind of lead generation. This is not advanced training. This is basic training on the basics of telemarketing leads, how they work, what my thoughts are on them, to just really equip a new agent with the information that they need to know about which telemarketing leads are preferable and which ones are the best to use overall. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is today's overview. I'm going to introduce myself and my business. We're going to talk about the very basics of telemarketing leads. Next, after that, we're going to go into why telemarketing final expense leads work, so that you can get a better idea of the thought process and mentality behind the success of the leads. Once we do that, we're going to talk about best practices on how to work the leads, what strategies and tactics to employ to get the most out of your investment. Then we're going to talk about the optimal areas to generate telemarketing leads. There's some pros and some cons here. There's some stuff you need to be concerned about. And then I'm going to go into specifics about how I teach my agents to approach telemarketing leads and how I train them to approach them so that they get maximal conversion. And then lastly, we're going to conclude on action steps you can take to get started with telemarketing leads, whether you're working with me in the Final Expense Agent Mentorship Program, or if you're just on your own and you're looking for ways and strategies to get your foot out the door and get the ball rolling. So, a little bit about myself. My name is David Duford. I'm the owner and operator of Final Expense Agent Mentor. The website's FEAgentmentor.com. I've been selling final expense life insurance for approximately, at the recording of this, about 5 years now, since 2011. And when I say selling final expense, what I mean by that is I've actually been in the field. I still am to some extent, where I sit down and do the same thing you guys do, or you're planning on doing, which is selling final expense face-to-face. Since 2013, I have taken a step up and began the process of training new agents and mentoring them as well on how to sell final expense. So I have about several years worth of training experience. I've had several hundred agents who have worked with me in some form or capacity since then. And my focus really in the final expense training business is to help agents that are new to final expense. Now, that may be somebody who's brand new to insurance completely, or somebody who has experience in another line of business and now wants to transition to final expense. The kind of person that works well with me generally appreciates training and mentorship. They want a transparent relationship. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I feel pretty strongly about a correct way and a right way to take somebody in and give them a great opportunity. And of course, I can't make the horse drink the water, as I say. However, I can put those tools in front of somebody who has the desire to succeed and give them, in my opinion, I think the best overall ability to not just experience short-term benefits, but also the long-term benefits of a program focused on independence and not captivity. What I mean by that is a program where we broker different insurance products as opposed to being stuck with one particular company. If any of this interests you, I'll just plug myself right now before we get into the information. Go to my website. It's FEAgentmentor.com. I've got tons of training. This is just a small sampling of what I give for free. If you're enthralled or enthused by anything that I say in this video, it's just a hop, skip, jump away to my website where I have even more information totally for free, just as my way of saying thanks for digesting my stuff and a way to get more familiar with the final expense program. Now, moving on. So what exactly are final expense telemarketing leads? This isn't rocket surgery or brain science or whatever. Telemarketing leads are just simply phone leads generated over the phone. Now, the question really comes down to, well, how more complicated can it get than that? Well, there are a lot of different methods to generate final expense leads. There's not just one particular method to do so. The old-fashioned way was for the agent, pick up the phone, press the numbers, wait for somebody to finally pick up the phone, and then at that point, convert them into a lead or some sort of appointment. Well, there's more methods now. There's more methods that have been banned by the government as well. So let's kind of go over those just as briefly, and then we'll go into more detail later on. So most typical traditional fashion is a live person located somewhere inside of the U.S. picking the phone up and calling, usually either in a virtual environment, meaning from the comfort of their own home, or perhaps in a call center environment if it's a business whose design is to hire telemarketers and have them generate leads. Now, with the advent of outsourcing, a lot of these live person telemarketing operations have moved outside of the U.S. In the telemarketing soliciting sense, most of what we've seen has been moved to the Philippines. And the reason being is, in general, and this is not just for final expense, this is just in general for everything. Filipinos generally speak good English. They're generally understandable on the phone. And so the thought process is, well, they speak good English, good enough, and it's basically slave labor, talking a couple bucks an hour, and these big corporate outfits think, well, hell, that's a good idea. Who cares about the quality? I'm saving a few bucks. So they outsourced a ton of these operations to the Philippines. The third option is really a recent invention, a recent creation over the past couple of years, where the aforementioned outsourced leads, people really are frustrated with, frankly, having foreigners talk to them over the phone. This is heightened with a senior population who already is hard of hearing, really doesn't appreciate non-American speaking to them, and puts another barrier of difficulty between actually taking somebody and generating them into a lead. So the avatar leads were born out of this frustration because they combine both the benefits of U.S. speaking people and the ease of which they hear those, along with the benefits of the cost factor to outsourcing leads. We'll get to those in a little while on a more detailed basis. And then lastly, the other way to generate other methods to generate telemarketing leads is using press one or voicemail leads. I'll talk about those more in depth later, but all I can say right now in this video is anything and everything you see press one or voicemail related is illegal. Basically, don't use them, even though there are a lot of agents that still do. So let me explain to you why telemarketed leads just work as well as they do. The biggest benefit to telemarketing leads is the turnaround time and the cost relative to direct mail. Telemarketing leads are cheaper than direct mail final expense leads to generate. If you've seen any of my direct mail presentations or videos, you know that direct mail generally costs on the very low side mid-20s per lead, and on the top side lower to mid-30s per lead. As far as telemarketing leads go, telemarketing leads I have seen as cheap as $6 or $7 a lead, all the way up to $15 to $20 a lead. There's a pretty big gamut there, and we'll go into more explanation down the line why that is. But what the biggest benefit for telemarketing leads is that if you get an agent who is new to final expense and they don't have the money to put into a direct mail campaign, and we're talking several $1,000s of direct mail, telemarketing leads are a fine alternative on a short-term basis to get someone started in the final expense and experiencing the realities of selling people face-to-face. The other benefit is that the leads are faster. Telemarketing leads are faster to fulfill than direct mail leads. This is the other side of the coin. With direct mail leads, you take about 4 or 5 weeks to get anything back from the original mailing that you did. So there's always a lead time for a considerable period of time. There's no way around it. It's just the way it is. And it doesn't matter which vendor you use. It's going to take about 4 to 5 weeks in general to turn leads around. So you've got a higher price point while you also have a longer fulfillment time. Again, barriers to entry for new agents who are really taking a risk on a new venture. Telemarketing leads, on the other hand, generally take about a week to turn around, maybe a week and a half. Depends on the area, depends on the data you give them. But the bottom line is that there's less money invested and less time to fulfill, meaning your money's not tied up nearly as long and as much with telemarketing leads versus direct mail. Again, more reasons why agents use these is because they're quick and easy and not as expensive to fulfill. Thirdly, they're easier to reach on the phone in general due to the nature of how they are generated. Here's what I mean. If you use direct mail leads, you're reaching people not on the do not call list that don't get solicited as much. And people who are on the do not call list took the time to put themselves on the do not call list because they don't like to be solicited. They don't like to be harassed. And those people generally are a little bit more screening and sophisticated enough to look at what comes through and decide if they want to actually speak to those people. So with direct mail leads, you tend to have to door knock more. Some areas of the country are better, where a lot of them will pick the phone up and a lot of them will set the appointments. But as time goes on, I think the trend will be it'll be harder to get people on the phone. And so with telemarketing leads, the whole generation aspect starts from the phone. These people pick the phone up for a complete stranger and go through the process of agreeing to a lead. Now, to take that a step further, if they're going to pick the phone up one time for a complete stranger and agree to a lead generation, they're probably going to do it again. And they're probably going to do it again when you call them to set an appointment. So this is my point, is that there's a better conversion ratio for setting appointments over the phone with telemarketing leads, in my opinion, than there is with direct mail. It's at least equivalent, if not better. And again, they're more likely to be willing to talk to you on the phone because people generally fall into a behavior pattern in doing things. It's very unlikely that this is the only time they've ever picked the phone up for a prospector or a solicitor. And the likelihood, again, is high. They'll do it again. The last point here is that the type of person in 2016 and beyond that's not on the do not call list, they tend to be the type of person who buys final expense. And this is not meant to be an insulting description about what I'm about to say, but a person who's not on the do not call list is not a sophisticated person. Let's just face it. They still have a phone line, whereas the vast majority of society has moved away from a landline. That's what I meant as a landline. They haven't taken the simple steps to block getting calls by the dozens per week from people like us. And they've not done anything. And what happens is, my experience is, that kind of mentality mirrors the kind of person that buys final expense. More simple people that aren't sophisticated, and maybe people who, just don't match a more sophisticated audience. I don't know how to say it without sounding too negative. Final expense is sold to people who are world-class procrastinators. Final expense, as a side note, is much of a product that we sell as much as it is a market and a mentality of the prospects that we sell. And many times we're in the home and these people are having their phones blown up. Now, it's getting less and less with people picking up cell phones and dropping the landline. But still, the people that get solicited tend to be the people who buy final expense. So I've noticed it, and other people have noticed it. And so anyways, the kind of people who are going to respond to a lead generally are the kind of people that buy. So that's a good thing. All right, moving on here. So let's talk about best practices on working telemarketing leads. So the faster you actually work the telemarketing leads, the better. Now here's what I mean. You're catching people off guard when you generate a telemarketing lead from them. They're busy cooking. They're busy watching Jerry Springer. They're on the toilet. They're doing something completely different than thinking about, how am I going to pay for my burial? Okay, let's just face it. Their mind is not on you calling them up to sell them something about burial insurance. Okay, much less generate the lead. So what happens is, this is, again, relative to a direct mail piece, where a direct mail piece is superior to any sort of telemarketing is that it's more of a contemplative engagement. They get this solicitation through direct mail. They look at it, read it over, show it to their spouse, they put it aside, think about it, wake up the next morning, then they fill it out, walk it over to the mailbox, and then send it back. So there's a lot more thought on the person's mind before they actually take the effort to send it back. There's a lot more effort voluntarily required. Whereas a telemarketing lead, we kind of slam through to get them to the point of actually wanting somebody to come over and speak with them. So all said and done, if somebody's busy doing something and we do what's called interruptive marketing and get them to agree to a lead, sometimes they're halfway listening. Let's just face it, it's not an entirety of where they're actually completely engaged and enthralled and emotional. They're halfway engaged, they're agreeing to it, and they're expressing some interest, and there probably is some interest, but they're not totally mind focused on what you're saying. And so what I mean by that is that it all comes down to the fact that with these realities, you have got to work these leads as fast as possible. You can't wait around. You can't sit around, let these leads gather weeks and weeks of time. Really, the best time to call on these people is the same day or the day after or the second day after. That's the best opportunity you're going to have to turn these people into appointments. Because as time goes on, the memory becomes poor, and they're not going to be nearly as in tune with remembering that you actually called, or the lead generator called on them and developed the leads. And there's some things you can do, and there's the leads that we provide at Final Expense Agent Mentor that help bridge the gap between the memory or the actual generation of the lead and the memory of actually doing it. And I think they make a tremendous difference. And so I'll get into more of that down the line. Now, the next point here is with appointment setting. I think you got to lead with appointment setting. You don't have to, but it's just easier. These people pick the phone up. They're going to do it again. You might as well just call them up and set an appointment. They're accustomed to it. But you got to make sure you door knock these leads too. I always thought, and I still do to some extent, that telemarketing leads are a lot harder to door knock than direct mail. The reason is you don't have a visual crutch to show them. With direct mail leads, you can say, hey, look, you see this lead here? Yeah. You see you signed it? Yeah. Well, that's why I'm here. You can't do that with telemarketing as easily. Again, as I mentioned, we generate things in my program, information that is essentially is the same kind of crutch mentality. We're going to be able to share with them things they shared with us that are more personal in nature, and meaning that they're going to have a better time remembering. And if they don't, they know that, well, hell, if I told them this stuff, then I probably did do it, which still is the leverage that you need to get in the door at times to set an appointment. Now, you want to utilize all the information provided in the lead. Just like I said, when you set the appointments or door knock, you've got to mention, hey, you told us your address is 123 Hereford Street. You told us your beneficiaries were your sons, or perhaps your favorite hobbies, is shooting guns at insurance agents. Stuff like that. If you use that stuff to jog their memory, and you got to be ready to do it because you have to assume they're going to forget everything. That's how you convert more of these leads into appointments. And just like I mentioned earlier, telemarketing is interruptive marketing. The prospects are doing other things while we are actively soliciting, whether it's generating the first time of the lead or setting the appointment. We're not front in mind in the lead generation process, which again dictates the reason why we've got to prospect these people as quickly as possible. So how do you pick areas to target telemarketing leads? Well, first of all, if all else is equal, the preference is to target a more densely populated area. And the reason comes down to the fact that we rely on very limited data to call on. What I mean by that is we have a do not call list that essentially wipes away 80% of the callable data. We, of course, in my program at least, I can account for the fact that we're completely compliant as best as possible. It's not possibly perfectly compliant because there's data that's not up to date. Somebody who just signed up for the do not call list isn't going to be updated immediately in our data. But we follow the rule as it is to generate the data in a compliant manner to the best of our abilities. Now, with that said, that leaves us minimal area. And what you don't want to do with telemarketing leads is get too rural in nature. You will be between appointments and tremendous amounts of windshield time. If you're in a very rural area, you'll be all over the place. And what that does is that reduces your efficiency. You're all over the place. You're not selling, you're driving. Now, that may not be as big of a deal to some people, but it can grind on you over time when you're driving and putting 1,000, 1,500 miles on your car every week to just see some telemarketing leads. So the more populated, the better. If you're in a metro market, that's great. Actually, in the bigger cities, these avatars, these telemarketing leads are fantastic. You're going to stay a lot more geo-consolidated than a guy like for myself that may live in rural Tennessee or rural Georgia, where you're going to be all over the place just to see enough people to sell them. Make sure, and this is important too, you rotate your territories out frequently. It doesn't matter what kind of telemarketing leads you use. If you're grinding on these prospects and calling and calling and calling, people are going to notice that your numbers that they're calling on is popping up the same over and over again, and they'll get wise to it. These people aren't stupid. They'll see it and they'll know it's a solicitation call at best, at worst a collection call, and they don't want to talk to either anyway. So they're going to get wise and they're not going to pick up. And if you keep slamming an area, it's going to become obvious that you're not going to get nearly as many leads back from it. So you're going to have to retool and re-campaign into a different area. So always be open to telemarketing leads. I can tell you this, running avatar leads in where I live, I would run about, if I was running 50 to 75 avatars a week, I would work 1 week in Chattanooga, 1 week in Knoxville, 1 week in Northwest Georgia, 1 week in Huntsville, and probably rotate it in that kind of fashion, because that's really the only way to not burn out area. But you can tell if you look on a map, I have a 150-mile radius that I'm traveling, and so that becomes the issue, is the drive time. And if you put it in a rural area, you're just going to be miserable after a couple of weeks and wondering, what the hell am I doing? Okay, lastly, most vendors allow you to exclude zips. Look, if there's some areas in a big metro market you don't want to go, or if you're just not comfortable with something, these guys will let you exclude zips, which is great. You can target the areas that you want to target. Moving on, let's go to the next page. How Final Expense Agent Mentor recommends you buy and work your telemarketing leads. So first of all, if you're my agent, I would tell you this. And if you can't get direct mail, that's always the one thing we want you to do. If you can't do it though, and you still want to work together, and you got enough money to put together for some avatar leads or some telemarketing leads, I always recommend you do final expense avatar leads. And here's the reason. The cost that we can provide, the price point we provide, is super cheap for our vendor partnership. The guy that actually does our avatar leads is a final expense agent on a part-time basis, so he understands the market. But on the other hand, he also is an expert in the avatar generation field. He's been doing it for several years for other industries, so he knows how to do it in a high quality, reasonably priced manner. As an agent, our leads start at $7.50 a piece, much lower than a lot of other vendors. Now, I'll mention some vendors at the very end here you can use if you decide not to work with me. That's totally fine, and they're decent quality. The leads we use, the leads generally, like I said, with us, turn around within 3 to 5 business days, and they use very up-to-date data. A lot of vendors out there use old data. I called on an avatar lead once in Dalton, Georgia. Turns out the guy was in Thomasville, Georgia. And if you pull up a map and see Georgia, the distance between Dalton, Georgia, which is in North Georgia, and Thomasville, Georgia, which is in South Georgia, about 30 minutes from the Florida-Georgia line, it's about a 5-hour drive. The guy used to live in Dalton about 5 years ago, and so the vendor was using this ancient data and wasn't doing his job on keeping things fresh. Well, I just wasted a valuable hour and a half, 2 hours of my time, and some money on a lead that wasn't within my area. Again, important to have vendors that use up-to-date data. You also want to make sure, again, the recommendation is use a vendor that's going to collect information on prospect. maybe their favorite color, hobby, beneficiaries, desired face amount. All of this is useful in getting to the point of generating the lead. Now, a couple of things I want to mention here. Very important. I make this clear. I never recommend using any kind of press one or voicemail leads. I don't recommend my agents use human telemarketers because I just don't see the reason to do it now with the avatar program. It's not that it's bad, it's just price-wise it's about half the cost in general, and the quality is about the same. So, unless you don't have any options as a non-final expense agent mentor agent for avatar leads, then I'm going to give you a link to a good human telemarketing vendor that I've used before, but I don't recommend it generally. And I never recommend press one or voicemail leads. The bottom line with those is that they're completely, entirely illegal. There's no basis for ever using them. And any vendors that use and say that press ones or voicemail leads are legal are liars. And they're committing illegal generation acts or out of compliance. And it's just a matter of time that they get sued. And the truth is that you could be sued too. And you don't want to go in that direction if you can help it. So don't go that direction. Just stick with avatars. The quality difference isn't that big of a deal. And remember, at the end of the day, as I always say to agents, is that your license is a privilege. It's not a right. It can be revoked if you're found to do things that are not good or representative of an ethical agent. And I wouldn't put it past any DOI or Department of Insurance that they would can your license because you're doing something illegal like generating press ones or voicemails. So there you go. That's my rant. I wanted to throw that out there. At the end of the day, again, Final Expense Agent Mentor and myself, both one and the same, recommends that all telemarketing lead generation is ultimately a gateway drug to direct mail. We do not use we don't use telemarketing generation on a consistent basis once an agent has advanced to the upper echelon of his selling abilities. I have right now on top of mine maybe one or two agents that are using avatars that are advanced agents, but it's always the other 95% of the time a gateway drug to either patch the gap if there's a slow response rate in direct mail leads, which does happen occasionally with all vendors, or they just need that, unless if you live in a huge major metro market area like a Dallas, a Houston, a Chicago, potentially in Atlanta. There's just not enough data to keep it on a strong, consistent basis. So use telemarketing to get yourself to a direct mail campaign, because direct mail is where the top 10% of final expense producing agents reside. All right, so action steps to get started with telemarketing leads. So pick a vendor, okay? If you're working with me, I already have the vendor. I'll get you the form over, you fill it out, describe the areas you want, boom, we're ready to roll. If you don't work with me and you want some recommendations, the following two are great places to start. I've worked with both. I have more experience with Matt at the Lead Jerk than I do at the Leads Hub, but I can account for both of them being honest people that want to help out agents that want to help themselves. If you're looking for avatars, Matt Lowry at the Lead Jerk is going to provide you some decent quality avatar leads. I want to say his leads run between $8 and $10 for avatars. Not bad. As an agent with me, the leads are a little bit less expensive. I think the quality of our data is better than Matt's. However, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're garbage with Matt, but they are a comparable alternative if you're not working directly with me as a mentorship agent. If you needed live human telemarketing leads for some reason, Mark Forte at the Leads Hub is a good option. I've used his before. I was impressed. They're telemarketing leads. I sold some sales on them and whatever. They were good enough. So a couple other things, other action steps. The best thing to get involved with any telemarketing, any lead generation efforts is don't place your hopes and dreams on one order. You have to understand that, look, this is sales. This is straight commission. Some days everybody and their mother buys, other days nobody buys. And you really can't determine if a lead campaign is a good campaign until you put in about a month's worth of regular ordering. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you have a bad week, chalk it up to inexperience. Give yourself a couple more weeks to try out an approach to the business with the telemarketing lead generation. Try a different area out, try different variables, but definitely recommend that you invest in a good volume of leads, a good number to make a determination on where a good number would be around 100 leads. If you don't sell out of your avatars, if you're not selling 15 apps off of 100 avatar leads, 10 to 15 at least, then there's probably something wrong. They're probably not any good. Same thing with the live telemarketing leads. That's kind of my generally speaking, a 10%, 15% closing ratio, or app to lead ratio. Application lead ratio for you new guys, if you don't know my nomenclature. Lastly, make sure you're both calling and setting appointments over the phone and door knocking them too. Utilize all abilities and all mediums to convert leads into sales. You're new, you got more time than money, and well, you may have more money than time. I wish I was in that position. One day I will be, completely. But in the meantime, you have more time than money, so please go out there and squeeze every last dollar out of these leads. Utilize them to their fullest extent to make sure that you get the sales out of them. And this concludes my overview on the final expense telemarketing rules of engagement. I hope you enjoyed it. This is a pretty good overview. If you're reading the transcript in this, best thing to do from this point is to scroll up. I've got some links that go into further explanation of, for example, the avatar leads. I go into great detail in another video, as well as another link transcription. More information on the voicemail leagues and their illegality, and then of course the pros and the cons of telemarketing leads overall in a more detailed discussion. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.